Hello and welcome to another D&D Stories. I am your host, TheWriter, and this is a show where I sit here and regale you with all the tabletop gaming stories and remember when something cool happened. So, today we're going to go into an early campaign of mine just when I'd arrived at college as a relatively new DM and ran into a group of very serious veteran D&D players. Now, let's start this with a quick, gaming philosophy sort of thing. There are two types of gamers in the world, in my opinion. There's the people that play for fun, and there's the people that play to win. Now, the people that play for fun are the ones that hang out, they laugh, they have fun, they play, World of Warcraft to play together with people. They play board games and they roll the dice and they have fun and stuff like that. And there are the people that play to win, the ones that, the Korean guys that play StarCraft for a living, the guys that play Call of Duty that are throwing things out of windows every time they die, and, they're not happy unless they're on top, optimized. There's no other way to play because the numbers say this is the best, most optimal path to do things. And when I was getting ready to throw this campaign, what I didn't realize is I had run into four of the latter, four of the stop having fun, this is the way it's done kind of guys. They power gamers, if you will. And there's a difference between power gamers and optimizers. An optimizer kind of knows their way around the system. They know a thing or two about the backstab rules, etc., etc. These guys, we had what do my notes say? We had a sorcerer that could throw 64 fireballs in a day for 36 damage. And, not 66. No, he took maximized spells. So it was 36 damage every time, 64 times a day. That kind of group of people. And there were four of them who all had the same mindset. So, new DM versus four power gamers. It was kind of scary. So, I essentially got steamrolled. But I'm going to try and tell you the story of the campaign itself and leave as much bitching out of it as I can so it makes for a better story. Because if I sit here and bitch about power gamers for an hour, nobody's going to care, and, I'll look like a serious wimp. But in the meantime, these guys knew 10 times more about Dungeons and Dragons than I did, and I came at them with a relatively light combat, some role play, some dungeon crawling, go gather the five things sort of campaign. And they ran over me at every intersection. So that being said, it made for a very short campaign because nothing I threw at them stood any chance. So let's get into it, shall we? Once upon a time, there was a beautiful young maiden named Elizabeth Matrion. It was a beautiful, blonde, slender young thing who knew her way around the smaller end spell books. She was well-read, very kind to children. Her family was rich and powerful, and they had, swaths and swaths of land and a big mansion and grounds that were cared for by many a groundskeeper. And whom should spot her one day but a paladin of Bahamut, a silver dragon, 300 years old, relatively young for a dragon. And, he saw how smart she was, how powerful, how beautiful, and he was instantly fell in love with her. But he thought, well, if I just, dive in out of the sky and give her roses, she might have a heart attack. So he transformed himself into a swan and stayed at her family's pond for weeks on end, where she liked to sit and read poetry. And there he feigned the existence of a swan to look upon her beauty, to see what books she was reading, to come nearer and nearer to her as though he were a wild animal. And of course she has the Disney princess motif going on, that she might reach and touch the top of his head, and isn't he an adorable trumpet swan? until eventually one day he grew up the courage to reveal himself to her and to proclaim his love, a mighty paladin of Bahamut, the good god of dragons, and a silver dragon himself to boot, one of the metallic breeds that is of the good alignment. So he was a all-around good guy, paladin, silver dragon, follower of Bahamut, had fallen in love with her, and he expressed his love, and he was upright and strong and honorable, and of course he's a dragon, so he can be a man as well at his own whims. And so they spent many a day together by that pond. She would go out there telling her family she was there to read or paint on a canvas or watch the local wildlife, and she would meet with him in secret. And as their love blossomed, so did their growing affection for each other. And of course, one day they made love by moonlight, and her happy shrieking went out across the plains as he and whom should hear all of this ruckus but her brother, William Matrion, who quickly found out that this man she was sharing a shadowed tryst with was a dragon, and did not find out that he was a silver dragon nor a paladin of Bahamut, merely that he was a dragon. And human history says that all dragons are evil throughout all the different mythologies, and that's just how short-sighted he was. That there are good dragons and evil dragons, just like there are good people and bad people. So William goes to his family, his father especially, to say, this is, look at what my little sister is doing. We have to lock her away, get her away from this beast who has clearly seduced her. And so they took Elizabeth away in the middle of the day because she was starting to go there only at night. And they locked her away from this dragon's sight. His name was Mazadache. And of course, he came to their door as a man and said, where is Elizabeth? And, she's off somewhere, we don't know where she is. And, look to the left, look to the right. You could tell they were lying. And, he has paladin powers that can prove that they're lying. And he grows angry, and he stomps off. Comes back again. They won't reveal where she has been taken to. It's clearly against her will, or she would have said something to him, as they've grown close to each other. They've made love by moonlight in the sight of Bahamut and all these other different things that she would not have just left of her own free will and not said anything. She is not that kind of woman. And in the meantime, Elizabeth, locked away at a different family estate out of Mazadache's reach, grew sick with heartache that her beloved would not come for her, could not find her, and her family, basically kept her locked away in a princess tower somewhere, and eventually she took her own life. Now, word of this traveled rather quickly because suicide amongst normal families is not something that can be kept under wraps because, the maids, the butlers, the help always talks. And of course it spreads into the village tavern, and of course from tavern to tavern the bards hear about it, and the bards start singing songs about poor old Elizabeth Matrion, who lost her love and took her own life by poison. And this reaches Mazadache's ears, and he loses his shit. Mazadache, goes up into the sky. He becomes the fully fledged, platinum knight, the dragon, priest of Bahamut in all of his, platinum armor, shining like the holy hellfires of the sun, and descends on the Matrion mansion, and he burns it to the freaking ground. And silver dragons have cold breath, so imagine how hard that was. He was using holy fire to destroy this entire freaking place. The help died, the stable people died, the butlers, the maids, most of the family members. Only William made it out alive from that particular mansion. Now, there are several other, branches of the Matrion family, but that one in particular, who dared secret her away from him, his beloved, and then, mistreat her so badly that she took her own life from heartbreak, they would all burn for this. And he rained holy fire from the sky until there was nothing but a scorch upon the land, and William Matrion, was the only one left standing. And he said, William, you're the last one left, and this household had everything to do with Elizabeth's death, and you're going to build her a crypt that is worthy of her beauty, of the wonderful majesty that was her life. And once you're done building that crypt, I'm going to tear you in half. And, Masadachi starts to lose some of his paladin powers because there's a big difference between justice and vengeance. Justice is about making things right. Vengeance is about making yourself feel better. And he has long since crossed into that line of making himself feel better by slaughtering this guy's family. So, William, of course, bows to his demands because he's a giant silver dragon who's raining holy fire from the sky. Well, however long his paladin powers lasted to do that. But raining holy fire from the sky and with, cold breath that could turn him into an ice block as soon as look at him, said, yes, I will build this crypt, this entombment for my poor sister who took her own life. He doesn't dare backtalk Masadachi because he's the one that saw them making love by moonlight and, went and told Daddy, and Daddy fucked it all up. So he's not going to mention that while he's, right in front of this angry, heartbroken dragon. So, being that he is of the Matrion family, he has access to quite a few resources, quite a few hands, quite a bit of money, and decides that he's going to build this big, intricate, underground crypt, because the bigger it is and the longer it takes to build, the longer he gets to stay alive. So Masadachi marks him with a magical rune so that he can never run away and hide, and says, come to me when the crypt is done or I'll come for you. And of course, William swears on his life that he will finish this crypt and then come and face justice or vengeance, whichever you would like to call it. And, many hands go to work, digging up the earth and, putting this tiny little mausoleum that leads down into a staircase that went out into a wild and intricate crypt to celebrate his sister's beauty, her scholarly pursuits, her artwork. Her body was entombed in the furthest reaches of the deepest halls in a coffin made of mahogany, and ivory and silver-studded nails and galvanized, doors that never rust no matter how hard it rains and things like that. He threw everything he had into it to the point where his household basically went broke. So, especially in medieval times, building a structure out of stone takes years. It takes a lot of people, a lot of time, and a lot of money. So he bought himself a couple of decades doing this. And, at last, Masadachi came forth when the crypt was done. His beloved was entombed. And, he stood there with William Matrion at its entrance just as he was closing the doors and putting the big padlock on so that she would, her rest would not be disturbed. And, 20 or 30 years has gone by. He is a much older man now. Masadachi, being 330, still young for a dragon, but, it's been 30 years. He's had time to cool down. Instead of deciding to rip William in half, he decides that he's going to addle his mind and curse the entire Matrion family to always tell the truth, for they lied to him when they spirited away his love into some other Matrion mansion and locked her away. So from then on, they could only tell the truth and no longer lie to all the people around them. So again, not a very paladin thing to do. So his paladin powers, what wisp of them was left Masadachi. So he was just a normal silver dragon from then on. So William, his brains addled and his family cursed, wandered out into the countryside not to be seen for quite some time. Fast forward about 50 years. William Matrion is an old man who sits drunk in a bar. He's got one chest of gold that, that's enough to keep him permanently away from sobriety and to keep him a room on the second floor of this tavern. And he's just like the local drunk. He's wearing rags. He's all scraggly. He doesn't bathe very often. He's got a bald head. He's just kind of the local crazy guy. And he gathers, in one of his few moments of sobriety, he gathers 4 adventurers to himself to try and break his family's curse. Like, it's been a very long time, at least by human terms, that his family, they've basically gone to ruin. Because if you have to tell the truth all the time, in business practices, in the halls of the law, and even on the street, when it comes to not hurting people's feelings, if you had to tell the truth 100% of the time, their richness, their nobility, it all drained away just bit by bit. Their reputations were ruined by spilling all their dirty little secrets. Their real opinion on so-and-so's cooking, their real opinion. They hated each other. Everybody around them hated them. His family fell to ruin. And it felt like they had scattered to the winds, and William Matrion was the only one left. A sad, tired, brain-addled old man who was begging these 4 adventurers for help. So, let's meet our contestants. We've got a fighter, and again, these are all power gamers, and I don't have names for any of them because they didn't really call each other by these names. They didn't refer to themselves by their names. There was no role play here. Despite that heart-wrenching backstory I just told you, there was no role play here. We had a fighter, sorcerer, the 64 fireballs a day guy, a warlock who could cast infinite spells called rituals, and a rogue who was what I call a sneak attack fiend. He went into the book, into the 3.5 book, and he printed out the couple of pages or a couple of paragraphs, whatever, that had all the rules for sneak attack. Like, you can do a sneak attack if X, Y, and Z. And he kept them in front of him to make sure he got a sneak attack as often as humanly possible. He would argue and beg and complain and nag and rule lawyer every single time he threw that D20 to attack somebody. He would check his sneak attack thing and then come up with an argument. And my God, I never played with him again after this campaign because he would not accept the fact that you can't sneak attack every single damn attack throughout the entire campaign, but he had a million excuses. So none of these men have names because none of them deserve names. They don't deserve to be remembered. So in a fleeting moment of mercy, Mazadache told him that his family's curse was sealed into 5 chalices. As he was once a paladin, he could bless water. And being dragon-sized, he would carry these big chalices on like a rucksack or whatever under his wing if he needed to give somebody holy water to cure their ails or whatever. He would have something human-sized to dip into some water, bless it, and then give it to them so they could drink it or pour it on themselves or whatever. And at the time, when he created the curse, he had 5 chalices with him. So he sealed the power of the curse into 5 chalices and hid them away so that the spell would last forevermore and into the descendants of anybody who called themselves Matrion. So to gather the 5 chalices would make them brittle, and you could just smash them with a hammer and the curse would be broken. Now he tells William this because the chalices were hidden in locations that would tell him the whole story of what happened between Mazadache, Elizabeth, and the Matrion family. So it was a sort of this is what happened, pilgrimage that you would have to go on in order to do this. But by now, William is a tired old man. He's pushing, like, well, what did we say? Even if he was 20 when he saw his sister getting banged by a dragon, that, plus 30 years makes him 50, plus 50 years, he would be 100 years old. Gosh, so for a human, he's on death's door anyway. He can't go a-questing anywhere anytime soon, so he doesn't have a lot of time left. But he was the only one that Masadache told about the existence of the chalices. So if he doesn't come forward and at least send somebody in his stead, some champions, to save his family from this 50-year curse, there wouldn't be anybody, because Masadache is not going to tell them. And if the knowledge dies with William, then nobody's ever going to know. And every descendant from every Matrion, if there are any, their family line might die off because they always have to tell the truth. And just in everyday life, it can make you really unattractive, so you're not going to be making a lot of babies. So, in a last, ditch effort to save his family from this truth-telling curse, William Matrion gathers these 4 guys and says, go find these 5 chalices, gather them to me, and we will smash them and save my family. The innocent ones that were in, completely different regions. They had just happened to share the same last name as me. My whole household is dead. I'm the last one. I'm the last man standing who deserves to have this curse. And, the help died, the stable hands died. My father, my siblings, everybody else has died of old age or died in the holy fires that this dragon rained from the sky. You have to save everybody else who was innocent in this. And they go, okay, well, what do the chalices look like? And, of course, he turns around because he's sitting at the bar, and he goes, they look like this. And he's got 1 chalice on him. So, hey, one down. Check that off. He's like, I keep it, I keep it with me. Masadache left it in the scorched ruins of my home, thinking that, whomsoever picks their way among the ashes would know the true fury of a dragon heartbroken and scorned. I burned my hands, and, he shows them, the ancient scars that he got when he was, freaking 50, and he's 100 now. So his hands are crinkled up like old apples that are left on the ground to rot, and he's got the scorched white skin and scar tissue all over. I found it while it was still smoldering, and you could smash this with a dwarven hammer and it would not bend or break. It looks like gold, and gold is malleable, but it is unbreakable unless the other 4 are present. So this is what they look like. Go fetch. is kind of what the quest became, and then go get X is not the most original quest there ever was. But, this was one of the first campaigns I ever threw in college, so give me a little bit of a break. And then I kind of realized what kind of players I had, because I had seen them, I had looked over their character sheets. I was like, wow, you can throw a maximized 66 fireballs 64 times a day. And, you, Mr. Warlock, you can have infinite spells. And, Rogue, I see you over there with all the rules to sneak attack. I know exactly what kind of player that's going to be. The most normal guy was the fighter. And, arguably, he could do more damage than any of them because he took this feat and that feat and that feat. They're all level 7, so they've got access to enough things to build something broken. Because once you know 3.5 D&D well enough, sometimes it can be hard to not build something broken, but if you're... I keep focusing on this. If you can throw 64 fireballs that are all maximized and do 36 damage apiece, why play, I mean, if you're gonna go, like, destroying cities, if you're like a wizard in the army, fine. You could be a siege weapon, a living siege weapon, but, a regular D&D campaign, there's no reason to throw 64 fireballs a day. But they didn't care. They just wanted to be, do the most epic amount of damage, get through all the monsters and enemies as quickly as they could. And that was just kind of their mindset. This entire backstory meant almost nothing to them. So the heavy role player and light combat DM meets the Diablo players that just want to kick in the door and blow everything up. So that was the kind of mismatch. I know I can already see you in the comments below. T, you should have told them what you were kind of expecting, or what kind of campaign you were going to have. You shouldn't have just invited 4 strangers in, and then they're going to make something that's optimized to do as much damage as they can, because they don't know what kind of stuff you're going to throw at them. You should have told them what type of campaign it was going to be. I know that now. Hindsight is 2020. Freaking 8 or 10 years ago, but I have learned since then. So let's continue with the story before you type that comment in. Needless to say, the 4 of them didn't have a brain between them, because they weren't real keen, other than talking to William Matrion, who was drunk in a bar and kind of crazy. They didn't really want to talk to anybody else. They didn't talk to the bartender. They didn't ask any locals for a map. They didn't ask if they knew anything about the area. They didn't want to go shopping. They didn't want to talk to anybody. They didn't want to bang bar wenches, talk to the local bards, speak to the town mayor and find out. No, nothing. They basically looked at me and said, well, where do we go from here? And I said, well, that whole giant backstory I just told you might try checking out the crypt, since it's the only named location I've given you other than the ruins of the mansion, and you've already got the chalice from there. You might try Elizabeth Matrion's crypt. It's like, well, do we know where that is? And I go, ask. And they go, where is it? I go, who are you talking to? Anybody. Anybody doesn't know. Yeah. And you see the kind of conversation, like they want like a map with an X on it, and they go, okay, that's where we go for this cup, and another X, okay, that's where we'll find the 3rd cup. And they want to be told, they want to be railroaded, which is, I've only ever seen that once in a group, and it was with them, and it was really strange. D&D players usually hate being railroaded. I mean, yeah, you give them a goal, and then you can chase the goal, but... And it's not, I don't look at my DM and go, okay, exactly where do I need to go and exactly what do I need to do so I can show off my maximized fireball the most number of times and stuff like that. And I go, well, the only 2 locations that have been mentioned by name are the ruins of the Matrion mansion, which you've got the chalice from there, and the crypt or tomb of Elizabeth Matrion. So they decide to go there. And of course they go to the local graveyard. It's not there. So they go to the nearest city to find out where she's buried, in one of the biggest graveyards in the land, because that's where all the nobles build all their giant angel statues, and isn't my grave awesome compared to that other guy and stuff like that. Elizabeth Matrion's mausoleum, like I said, had stairs that went down underground and into this network of tunnels separating out and celebrating all the facets of her life, her scholarly pursuits, her artwork, her beauty, her loyalty to her family, etc., etc. And of course her coffin is way the hell back in the furthest corner, because that's how dungeons are designed. Whatever you want to see is the furthest from the entrance. So a very basic dungeon crawl unfolds. They just kind of kick in the door and they break the lock and they kick in the door. There's not going to be shambling zombies or anything down in there that's evil. She was a beautiful young woman that met an untimely demise, of heartbreak and poison. So there are some very basic traps to protect her worldly belongings, to protect her body, etc., etc. There's a couple of like rat swarms that broke in through the walls just from sheer age. There's a gelatinous cube that formed and just wanders the hallways, eating anything that's not stone. There's, burnt out incense walks that are covered with dust and just sit there. It's a tomb to a good person. It's not going to be filled with death traps and acid pools and stuff. There are protective measures, but nothing that's going to stop these four people. So, they blow up the gelatinous cube with a couple of fireballs before it can get close enough to them, and they kick away the rat swarms and different things like that. And I wasn't a very good dungeon designer back then, but I was especially not good at dungeon designing for people that are just there to kill stuff. So they were really bored the whole time. But eventually they wander through, this door and that door and another, trying to find this chalice, because it's not going to be buried with Elizabeth, because the cups were made 30 years after she was placed in a coffin. So unless they freaking exhumed her and put it in there with her bones, it wouldn't make any sense. But they do find, like, her sarcophagus. They took her coffin out of the ground once the crypt was done and put it in a big stone sarcophagus and resealed it. And, it's got a statue laying down on it that's of her visage, so you could see how beautiful she was for the rest of eternity. And, of course, laying to one side of this statue's head is the chalice. So they find that, two chalices down, got it. And they turn around and they leave. Now, they didn't find the full extent of the crypt because they didn't look for secret doors. They didn't try to read any of the inscriptions. They didn't want to, they were just there to get to the end. So that's the kind of group this was. They didn't want to touch anything. They didn't want to read any of the lore on the walls or look at the tapestries, and, they didn't. Not really, just kind of an unwilling party. It was very strange to see a dungeon crawl like this. Like, I really should have said, hey guys, let's go play Diablo, and they would have been 10 times happier. I don't know why. Usually when you play D&D, you get like one power gamer, and that's enough. You can manage that person. But when there's four of them together, it makes a weird perfect storm of people that just have high numbers and want to, like, dick slap monsters around. And, there weren't any monsters, at least no big ones. So they were so bored. But they had two chalices, so that was fine. So they turned around and left. They didn't get to see the whole dungeon because they found the proper hallway before exploring everything. And they turn around and leave. And eventually they go back to William Matrion in the bar, and he just so happens to have in a chest in his room, he has the map to the crypt itself. And they go, oh, we should probably check that just to make sure we got everything, in case there's treasure somewhere. Because, fuck Elizabeth, and, don't disturb the dead or any of their belongings. We should have cleaned that place out. So while William is off, drinking at the bar, they unfold this map and they look at all of Bill's notes and they turn all the pages in his journal. And they basically root through his stuff to see if there's anything they can steal. And they find that there's a whole nother wing to the dungeon that might have another chalice in it. So they go all the way back to the city, which is another couple of days' ride. And they leave the chalice with William, and they go all the way back to the city, back to the big graveyard, and they find a secret door that they missed. And, they go through another series of dart traps. They go through, another couple of gelatinous cubes that drop from the ceiling, so they at least get a chance to attack them before they get blown up by Mr. Warlock and his infinite number of ritual spells. Eldritch Blast. How many of those can you do? Infinity. Eldritch Blast. Eldritch Blast. Eldritch Blast. We're going to walk backwards. The cubes are not fast. They're mindless. They don't even really have a facing, so you can't sneak attack them. So they just like kited them back, eldritch blasting until they got bored and they melted, and then they threw fireballs on them to make sure they were dead. So I'm checking my notes. Sorry. They go further in. They find dart traps. They find pitfalls. They find swinging log traps that would crush their ribs against the back walls behind them, etc., etc. And they find a secondary shrine. Elizabeth Matrion has her entombment and her all of her worldly celebrations, again, her art, her scholarly stuff. This hidden hallway has a shrine to Mazadache, the dragon. And on the wall, mounted on pegs, are his Paladin of Bahamut armor pieces. The Platinum Knights, the highest holy order of those who follow Bahamut and wield his holy powers on this material plane. And our warlock goes, "What is that made of?" And I go, "Platinum. They're Platinum Knights." They goes, "That armor set is made of platinum?" And I go, "Yeah, it's probably been fastened there for about 50 years, and it's really heavy. I'd tear them off the wall. We're going to sell that shit." And so they go up, they kind of like knock the little statue of Mazadache aside. It shatters on the ground. The candles, snap to one side as he just like climbs up onto the altar and starts tugging on them. And of course the fighter gets up there with his crowbar and they pry off, never mind, like, beware the sacrilege, don't disturb the dead or any of their anything like that. I mean, Mazadache is not dead, but, this ceremonial paladin armor got left in a tomb, and they are stealing it. And I was like, well, that's dragon armor. None of you can wear it. And they're like, we don't care. It's made of platinum. We'll melt it down into bars and sell it. So, between games, they decided, they did a bunch of math and figured out, how much does dragon armor weigh, and, minus 15% for snaps and buckles and belts, how much of that is actually metal, and if it's made of platinum, how much does that platinum weigh, and then based on that weight, how much is it worth? And they made tons and tons and tons of money stealing this armor and melting it down like the bastards that they were. I was like, all right, fine. I am the voiceless narrator. It's not like I can stop you. I didn't put any traps on it, so I wasn't just going to make up a trap to fuck with them. That would be dishonorable. But they stole this, this former paladin's armor, buried with his lover in her crypt. And I was like, Jesus, there's robbing the dead, and then there's asking for trouble. So they are instantly rich men, and they sell off these platinum bars, and they make a whole ton of money, and they go shopping, and they buy a whole bunch of stuff, among which the warlock buys a rapier, a piercing weapon, a slender sword that can kind of bend, but if you thrust straight on, it is a piercing weapon. And he named it after himself. He called it Hector's Sword of Slaying, and it did, and he threw all the enchantments on it because of course he did. So it was like a +3 rapier with like fiery explosion or something on it, something that would deal fire damage, because they knew they were facing down like a white dragon or a silver dragon or something like that. They only half paid attention to the lore, but they remembered that Mazadache had cold breath, according to the story, so he bought like a fiery rapier, because they figured they might eventually have to face him down. So they bought a bunch of new weapons and not much else, because they wanted to up those attack numbers some more, and that's kind of just how their minds work. They didn't buy cold-resistant armor or like scrolls of protection against ice or anything. No, they had to up those weapons some more, because that's all that counts. Because they just found as soon as I said platinum, they all lost their damn minds. And that was probably the biggest mistake I made in that campaign, was having that armor on the wall. And they tore it down, melted it down. Never mind that it was a holy set of dragon armor from the Church of Bahamut. I'm surprised that dragon god didn't just instantly curse them. Never mind where they found it, but Jesus. They made bank that day, and they bought a whole bunch of new, shiny, sharp objects to kill things with. So, in the meantime, shoved to one side because they were so happy to pull that armor off the wall, at that like little shrine, they found another chalice. And had they read any of the inscriptions, they would have heard more about how Masadache was a forsworn paladin who was upright and powerful and close to his god and his teachings, and how he fell from grace, and what a tragic story it was, and blah de blah. No, they didn't stop to read anything, so what the hell did they care? And that's why I'm kind of dripping in the story that they were supposed to hear, but didn't bother listening for while I'm telling you the story, because otherwise none of this would have made any sense. So, let's see, that's one from Bill, one from Elizabeth, one from Masadache's shrine. And they learn that there's 5 chalices, and they go, well, campaign being the way this is, and there is a dragon involved, and there are 5 chalices. The warlock Hector decides, Masadache probably has one. If I made a curse and made 5 chalices and scattered them, and I didn't want this curse to ever be broken, I would probably keep one on my person, or at least like in my house or something. And they go, where is Masadache buried? This is a shrine to him in Elizabeth's tomb. He was probably too big to bury here, right? And I go, I never said Masadache was dead. It's only been 50 years since the tomb was complete. He's a dragon. He was 300 years old when he met and made love to Elizabeth by moonlight. Then 30 and then 50 more, and so he's less than 400 years old. Dragons can live to be like 3,000 in certain settings of D&D. He's young and spry, and not even a fully grown, mature adult by now. He's probably an adolescent at best. And they go, oh, he's still out there somewhere. And I go, yeah, probably. You'd have to find him, though. And that means talking to people, reading signs, reading books, finding out the history, do something other than kill things. So, eventually they find out that Masadache is very much alive, and not only is he alive, but he is trapped somewhere. The Matrion family eventually learned why everybody was telling the truth, more than likely from William Matrion, who told them that a dragon that he had pissed off had cursed the entire family. So, they got together and hired X number of warlocks and sorcerers and etc., to trap Masadache in a forest somewhere, never to escape, that he could not leave the borders of the forest. And that was his punishment for his unfair punishment. And an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind, but it sure does make the first guy feel better. So round and round we go, spiting one another for a whole lot of nonsense. But the Matrions hired magic to trap him in this forest. And of course the party goes there and they check it out, and of course he circles the forest shouting in Draconic. He's been there for X number of decades since the crypt was done, so it didn't take them long to track him down. He's a big silver dragon who rained holy fire from the sky. So he was very easy to find and very easy to lure to a particular location. They probably said that his beloved Elizabeth was buried in that forest, and then that was all the bait that it took. So they go there, he circles the place, he is shouting in Draconic, shouting obscenities, even all these years later, he's basically gone. There's no paladin left. There's no Mazadache left. He is little more than a heartbroken beast at this point. And the party kind of realizes, even power gamers that they are, that the only way to deal with Mazadache at this point is probably just to put him out of his misery. So when they realize, Mazadache, he doesn't wear any of the armor anymore. He doesn't have satchels under his wings. He's probably got a cave somewhere in this forest. So in order to get in there undetected, they're going to need some bait. And they can't use William Matrion because he's the one that's paying them and they like his money. So there has to be another Matrion somewhere else that they can basically feed to this dragon while they're running by to go look for his like stash, his hoard, or whatever you want to call that people have like thrown money into the forest to tease him that the chalice is probably there if he kept one on him. So the forest is vast and the animals are many to feed him, but he's got to have a home somewhere. So our party members track down this other guy, Bill Matrion, which Bill is just short for William, but shut up. I'm also a William, and I happen to be called Tony. But they track down Bill Matrion, who is a bard, a man who owns a music shop. And they decide that they're going to kidnap him by grabbing a tuba off the wall, because he sells musical instruments. They grab a tuba off the wall, shove it over his head, and knock his ass out. And that is how they acquire him. So Hector, our warlock, who is quickly becoming the head of the group, tells the rogue to forge an arrest warrant so they can take him out in public, knocked out with a tuba on his head and not get stopped by the local guards. And of course the rogue rolls really high. He writes like a fake arrest warrant or like a bounty letter or a bounty sketch or whatever. And they throw him over a horse in a bag, and they've got this fake reward poster, and they take him out to Mazadache's forest, and they get stopped a couple of times, and the forgery passes the test each time. And they take him out to this forest, and they kind of like chain him up and throw the chain into the woods, and they go, Mazadache, look, a Matrion. And then Mazadache dive bombs like a peregrine falcon to freaking grab Bill's chain, tug him in, and then take him for a wild ride over the nearest mountain so he can find a perch and enjoy ripping him limb from limb. And they go, okay, he's gone. And, our sorcerer pulls up the find item spell. And he goes, okay, we're looking for the chalice of the Matrions. Go! So he can see 3 of them, with William Matrion, his own, the one from Elizabeth's tomb, and the one from Mazadache's shrine. And there are not 1, but 2 of them in Mazadache's forest. He kept 2 of them. And they go, oh, okay. So there are 2 here in the forest. And of course, find item can reach for hundreds of miles, because of course it can. And they beeline right from Mazadache's cave, and they find a hoard, mostly silver and copper from people just like, throwing coins into the forest to tease him that he can't leave the forest. And, oh, what a big bad dragon you are now. That's what you get for picking on the nobility, for the past 30 or 40 years, however long it took them to catch him. But he gathered it up anyway, even in the dead of night, and so he's got like a small hoard in there, among which are the 2 chalices. So they gather them up, they're like, yes, this is it. We've got the 4th and the 5th chalice. And of course, as soon as they turn around to leave, they find Mazadache is arriving home, his muzzle, covered with blood and gore of the guy who just happened to have the last name of Matrion. Because again, there are many branches of this family. He didn't have anything to do with with Elizabeth's death, and he wasn't old enough to be around back then, so he would have had to have been pushing 80 to be involved in all that. So it comes down to a dragon fight, and of course Hector has Hector's sword of slaying and kind of wades in. So when it's 4-on-1, even in a dragon fight, it doesn't last for very long. And of course, Masadace no longer had his paladin powers. He was weak, he was sickly, he was halfway insane from being caught in that forest for so long. He was, his horns were brittle, and, he had his cold breath, but that was about it. So it did not take them long to rip Masadace from this mortal coil. And of course, Hector had to use Hector's sword of slaying, right up through his muzzle, up, through the roof of his mouth and out the back of his head, to put him out of his misery once and for all. It was not much of a fight, but it was not meant to be much of a fight, because you don't get much weaker and sicker than all that stuff. So the story was kind of lost on them as to why this dragon was so weak, but them's the roles. So they gathered up what little Masadace's horde had in it, and they had the 2 chalices, and they went back to William Matrion, and they all gathered in his hotel room, and they've got these 5 golden chalices here together. And, they take out like a regular, like, blacksmithing hammer or something, and they smash them one by one. And they go, okay, William, tell us the sky is green. And, William looks out the window and he goes, the sky is green. And they go, that's a lie. That's a lie. Good job. The curse is broken. And they go, yeah, we got the cups of the Matrions. We broke them. The curse is broken. Your family can go free now. And, William congratulates them. He showers them with money. But, it's the end of the campaign, so it doesn't matter. But he showers them with money. And, he says, I've got a lot of letters to write. And I'm sure everybody's wondering, why they can suddenly, not tell the truth if they don't want to. The ability to lie is not something to brag about. But, not having to tell the truth 100% of the time is. So I'm going to write to every one of the Matrion households and to let them know what has transpired here. His addlement is gone. I mean, he's still like 100 years old, but, he'll find somebody to dictate to make sure that the word gets out, that 4 noble heroes tracked down the 5 cups of the Matrions, slew Masadace and put him out of his misery, and, Elizabeth, her memory can finally rest in complete peace, never to be bothered again, save for the songs of bards that sing her praises. So the campaign kind of ended there, and again, I kind of set out with this weird and lofty, Romeo and Juliet kind of thing. And the family had no reason to hate Masadace. He was a silver dragon, a paladin, a follower of Bahamut. They couldn't stand the idea that this powerful creature who could take the form of a man, her brother saw, was romancing their little girl, and it set off this horrible chain of events just from what, racism? I don't... It doesn't even make sense now that I say it out loud, but these misunderstandings, misinformations, etc., set off this huge chain of misery, and I got the completely wrong set of players to express it to, so it was kind of an empty husk of a campaign to say, go fetch the 5 things, and, they went to go fetch the 5 things, and that was kind of it. So it was kind of bittersweet for me, and just another, notch in their belts for those 4 guys. And again, you'll usually have 1 power gamer, but not 4, so that was just the perfect storm of crazy for me, because there was no failure for them, there was no rolling low damage for them, there was no You know, they were too good. They knew the system too well, and I didn't know it well enough to defend myself. So it was just a bad combination. But hopefully you gleaned something from that. Hopefully you liked the story, the story itself, the campaign. Hopefully, and I guess that's where we'll stop for today. So I hope you enjoyed that story, and I'll see you guys on the next D&D stories. Keep gaming. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I really love telling D&D stories, and I also really love eating food. So if you'd like to toss a couple of gold pieces into this humble bard's hat, be sure to check out my Patreon. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit the like button as well. And if you'd like access to maps, character art, and channel updates too, check out the D&D Stories Facebook. Keep gaming!